So yesterday I had to end the video abruptly because my little, sidekick / co-captain up here, made me a little, nervous because she was all passed out and sleeping hard. So she is okay. She is just pushing 12 hard. She'll be 12 next month. And so she sleeps a lot harder than she used to. And I could not tell if she was breathing or anything. And she made me nervous. And you can kind of see the moment of panic on my face in the other video. So, I just wanted to make sure to clarify she's fine. She is a Royal Hellion. And today, I don't know if it was last night or this morning, my mom moved this bag of candy that I had on the kitchen counter. She moved it over to the table with the intention of putting it back before she left, and then that didn't happen. So my little Hellion friend here took it upon, either her or her brother back here. They're all guilty anymore. Gidget used to stay out of it, and now I think she's figured out that she wasn't getting in trouble, so now she's joining in on the fun. When they get into stuff they're not supposed to, like shopping in the pantry. I came home one day, and there was a bag of like those Cheetos Puffs that the bag was demolished, and everything in it was gone. So they enjoyed that one. And then Gidget was working on a can of Pringles, and they had it split down the side, but she wasn't getting very much out of it, or they at least just got started on it. So she was working on that. That was the first time I really saw her involved with the pantry heist. We had this little rack that was in front of it, and for a while it did good at keeping them out of it until they realized that I think something got moved off of it, and they realized they could push through it, so they just started pushing through it and going around and shopping for whatever they could reach. And so today's was a bag of candy, and it was like Halloween candy, I think. So there were Snickers bars and I think Reese cups and Kit Kats and stuff. So they had that. From past experiences, those type items do not appear to do anything substantial for them. Ziva has gotten into all sorts of shit in the time that I have had her. Love this dog to death, and she has stressed me out immensely on more than one occasion. So like at one point I had this sea salt and caramel candy bar that was in a drawer on my nightstand. I have two nightstands that match, and one of them is actually used as a nightstand, and the other one is in the other room. And it was like in the office at one point. So, it's back in the office, but Gracie kind of took it over for a little while. At one point I had a candy bar in the top of the nightstand, and I had opened it and tried like a row, because it was one of those that has like the little sections in it, and so I had a row of them, and I was looking forward to having some more of it one day, and I go to look for it, and it's MIA, and there's the wrapper, it's on the floor, and that was a kind of pricier candy bar. She's gotten into a bag of off-brand Reese cups. God, one day she ate a loaf of my mom's keto bread, and we were getting ready to take her to the emergency vet because her belly was bloated, and she got to a point where she was looking like she couldn't walk anymore, or was like kind of getting stiff. And I called the local vet to talk to them, and they said get her to the emergency vet. And I was waiting on my mom to get back with the car, and because she was like right down the road. And yeah, I was pretty panicked about that, or at that moment. And I don't know what happened, but like she must have farted. And it's like all at once, all the pressure was, it was let up, and then she was able to walk just fine. And I have a friend in Alabama that's a vet tech. We connected because of the bearded dragons back when my ex wanted to breed bearded dragons, and I didn't, but got pulled along with the endeavor anyway. And I had taken one of them to the vet, and we linked up that way. And I sent her a copy of what was in the ingredients, and she said just make sure it's not the kind that has the xylitol or whatever that stuff is. And it was not, thankfully. But yeah, so she farted, and she was great. Yeah. And we've been working on her belly because she's hella chunky for her size, and has been for a good bit of time at this point. And so we were working on that for a long time, and we had her to where she was looking good, and then she started finding things to get into again. So yeah, but she is, like I said, she'll be 12 next month. And so she scared me a few times. She's had a couple trips to the emergency vet, but luckily, like, that stuff, I'm sure we're gonna the Halloween candy that my mom had, like the Snickers, had like green filling in it, so it's like, oh, I'm sure this will be lovely. She'll go from the carrot poops that she's been having here lately, because she's had some carrots to chew on to keep her busy when we've been leaving the house for an extended period of time. And then today she got into that stuff. So this dog, there was this time when, so when I moved back in with my parents before we moved to Alabama, for the time that my ex was in job training in Germany. And I think in that time she had this day where it's like she was having like this sort of, it kind of seemed like a seizure, but not entirely. And scared the crap out of her, scared the crap out of me, and she was super clingy afterwards. Didn't have the other two, so it was just me and her. That was our little, we were together all the time. But yeah, she did that. We were at my parents' house. So I called the vet, and they said, keep an eye on her. If she does it again, keep track of like how often, how far apart they are, and all that stuff. And, then we would kind of go from there. So when we were living with my parents that time around, she was, I got her in 2013, and it's 2014, so she was a little over a year old, and then she didn't do it again. It's like, okay, well, that's good. She didn't do it again until we moved back in with my parents, as I was working on getting a divorce. So that was the next time she did it. And she had a couple events like that where we took her to the emergency vet. It was like midnight or later, and was super stressed out about that. And then she eased up. By the time we got to the emergency vet, she was mostly fine. It was during the pandemic, so I was not allowed to go in with her. So she had to go in by herself and all that fun stuff. And then they couldn't find anything wrong with her. And so we ended up, when we finally left, after they did a bunch of tests and all that stuff, left, and it seemed fine. And then the next month she did it again, and then she hasn't done it again since. So it's like, I know what they were. But that time, so the time that time I was at work and my mom saw it, so she got a little video of it to show to the emergency vet. And they said it wasn't a seizure, but it looked like it was some kind of neurological event. But it's one of those things. She's done it like 3 times, and that's been it. She's had a couple times where I thought she was doing something similar, but then that wasn't the case. There was a time frame where I thought she was going to be doing that again, and then we discovered that she was terrified of the air fryer when my mom was using that. And like she would completely shut down and just shake. And it's like, okay, this isn't good. So we go back into my room or the office, and she'll be fine. But now that's kind of like her little safe place. She'll go and lay in the doorway of either my bedroom or office. If we lose her, that's usually where she's at. Or if I'm in the shower or whatever, she'll just go and lay there instead of doing anything else. But yeah. So yeah, she's scared the shit out of me a few times. And luckily she's still here, still good. But she's she's a special one. She's napping now. There she was. She's like, yeah, get that thing out of my face. Yeah. She's pretty chill most of the time. But yeah, like, she was quiet, wasn't snoring like she's breathing kind of heavy now because she's fat dog in her little sweatshirt and cozied up here taking a nap. But like, I couldn't tell if she was breathing or anything yesterday. It's like, so I had that panic. But I just wanted to start with talking about her just to clear up. She's fine. She's just rotten. Hella rotten. I told her she has to give me at least 15 years, if not 20. I told all of the whole group that, right, Gidgy? Yeah, Tazzy? Yeah. Told them they gotta give me that long. I think, like, for a while, the dog that held the Guinness Book of World Records for longest living dog or whatever there was like there was a 30-year-old blue heeler and a 29-year-old Australian Kelpie, or there was one of them, they couldn't prove its age. They didn't have like any paperwork from when it was born or anything. The other one they did, but they were right there together. And Ziva's a Kelpie, and then Taz is a blue heeler. So, and little Gidgy back there, right, Gidge? She is a blue heeler Australian Shepherd mix. Like I offended her or something. Hella ball obsessed, and we have not been playing much ball since we've been walking regularly, and now it's cold, so we don't go outside like we were. I did try yesterday when it was as cold as it. I think that's the lowest it's been so far. It was like 20, with a lower than that wind chill. And I went and sat outside in the chair that's under a tree, and it's like, this is not a good place to be. It's like chilled all the way through. It's like, yeah, well, this isn't going to work. So I threw the ball like 5 or 6 times, and it's like, all right, calling it. Time to go in. So yeah. So today, I had Gracie this morning, and I was going to take her for drop off again. Of course, yesterday there's the ordeal with my mom, went along with us, which was fine, but she wanted to go to UPS after we dropped Gracie off, and then there was a whole ordeal where we couldn't return the stuff that we previously were able to without packaging because they needed it packaged now, probably because of the holidays. So we did that again today, but with the things packaged and all that stuff. And then went to Walmart and did some grocery shopping, and my aunt went with us for the whole excursion. And then we ended up over at my grandma's house. we stopped and got breakfast and drinks, and then went over to her house, and we'd stopped at McDonald's because my aunt always gets points there and had like a 25% off coupon. So she got sandwiches for the four of us, and then my dad and my uncle, they came over at one point. And while we were sitting there, the hospital bed that my mom got for my grandfather was still in the living room, and the couch was on the wall that the picture window's on. It was bothering me because it was out of balance in the room. Still not ideal, but it's better than it was. But I was sitting there, and my grandma said something about wanting the bed out of there. And the past few times it's been mentioned, it was kind of one of those, we'll do that, but we don't have to do that today kind of a thing. So she mentioned it again today, and I was sitting, there used to be a bookcase in the hallway, and my aunt has that over at her house because that was what she was going to get from them, her inheritance. Like, I got the cabinet with the birds in it that she was wanting out of the middle bedroom, so I took that back in the fall and put it over in our living room. Even though she kept saying it wasn't a rush, but she would, whenever I was ready for him, it's like, yeah, I finally got tired of hearing about it. It's like, I don't believe that you mean that. And so I made a spot and took it over there. And, I ended up liking it real well when I was able to do that. And then we got the bookcase out of the hallway because, we were, for a very brief span, we wanted to be able to take a wheelchair through there in case my grandfather was at home, which likewise, that was very short-lived, and I don't think he made it I think the extent of his use of the wheelchair in the house was coming in from the car, and then that was it. Once he was in the bed, that was his spot. Because he was only there for like 3 days. And then yeah, so the bookcase was out there, and I was sitting on the floor, and my mom was sitting in the chair where my grandpa's chair, it used to be, it was his chair too, but it was one of those that helps you stand up from the sitting position and all that, because he was having issues getting up for a while. So we got that and switched out the chairs. My grandma was sitting in her chair, my mom was sitting in the chair in my grandpa's spot. My uncle was on the couch. My aunt was on the hospital bed. I was sitting on the floor. I could have sat on the couch, but my uncle was sitting in the middle, and I didn't want to sit. I don't like sitting close to him. I don't like sitting close to anybody, so at least not in my family. So it's like heavy energy that gets us. It's like you get close and it just kind of latches on. It's like, that's not fun. So yeah. So my grandma said something about it. It's like, I'm not doing anything. So I just got up and went and started moving stuff around in the middle bedroom to make room for it whenever we were ready to do that. Well, we ended up in go get 'em mode and ended up getting the bed resituated in that room, got the living room flipped back around, and she was thrilled to death because, like she would say things like, I would like to do this, but then she couldn't do it on her own, and anytime anybody's been there, it's like it hasn't been a priority enough. So then it's like, once I got started, then it just kind of started, everybody got started, and then eventually we got the stuff moved around. We got her puzzle table back up, but that's where all the flowers are, but they aren't on the kitchen table now, so she can use the kitchen table for dinner, and all that stuff. So that was helpful. I was like, I kept hearing these comments about would like this. It was like, at some point somebody's just got to start doing it. And so today that was me. And then we got going and we were really productive. And yes, there's a little bit more of a mess in other rooms where there wasn't yet, because we had to maneuver stuff out of there for a bit. But yeah, it's a lot better than it was. It took some time and effort though. My mom was like, I don't want to be over here long today, but then she had something she was working on, and then I just started doing that. And I wasn't necessarily like, hey, let's just do it now. It was just, let me at least get some space cleared, so if the next time, whoever's over here that can do it, because that bed had to come apart before we could move it, and that was a whole ordeal. But we were able to handle it, so. But it just took that little moment of, screw this, tired of hearing about it, let me go do something. So yeah, then I got it done. And I mentioned the other day that there was drama around the pickup for Gracie because her dad was going to pick her up that day, and then my mom ended up going without talking to either of us, so we could let her know that no, we're not picking her up today. She just went, and then we found out later, so then it was a big ordeal. And once, after I got a bunch of stuff situated over at my grandma's house and we all kind of slowed back down on it, it's like, okay, well, now I'm ready to go do something else and go deal with my dogs that are getting into shit they're not supposed to be. And yes, their boxes are in the house, or their crates, so I could put them up. The problem is I wasn't the one. Well, okay, first off, the problem was my dad was at home when they did it, and second, so they wouldn't have been locked up anyway, and secondly, they probably aren't going to think about putting them up since they've been running loose here lately. So I don't know. It seems like if I get into a habit of putting them in the crates before I leave for a while, then it makes them behave again, and then it takes a little while before they go full hellion. But it is what it is. Yeah. Oh, anyway, going back to the thing with my mom, like today we were picking Gracie up from school, so my mom got home after I did, because I just walked across the yard, and I said, okay, communicating. I said, do you want to go pick up Gracie? We are responsible for picking her up today. Do you want to do that? And she's like, well, I guess I can. I said the only reason it was a problem on Wednesday was because Wayne was picking her up and there was no communication about anything, because we didn't know that there was anything to communicate. We didn't figure my mom would just, dive right in at that point to go do it. It's like, but yes, we are picking her up today. So do you want to pick her up? And she decided that would be okay. So it's like, all right, then I'm going to go walk my dogs and whatever. So that was the whole thing. But yes, that was communicated. So like we were pushing the communication point. It was like, that's the only reason that there was any issue the other day. And it was like, the issues that we've been having is the ongoing issue, because, my brother's at the point where he can't stand the thought of having to talk to them most of the time because they're so finicky, and they throw the guilt around and all that stuff. So it's really hard to want to talk to them about anything. But especially here lately, the past few months, while my grandfather was in the hospital, Mom was going extra heavy on the guilt because we weren't responding how she thought we were supposed to. We weren't ass deep and being there all this freaking time like she wanted us to be, and she was there excessively, but whatever. But yeah, it's like, so they kind of stopped communicating. But Mom just kind of turned in on herself anyway, and wasn't communicating anything to anyone. But especially when she got mad at us, then it was even less communication than before. And it's like, so then that was an ordeal. And then, it got to a point where it's like, for me and my brother, we were raised on the guilt and shame bit. So it's like everything Okay, like stupid stuff that shouldn't be a big thing. If we knew she was going to react in some kind of way about it, then it became a big thing for us and like was very anxiety inducing because we knew she was going to respond in a way that was disapproving of us. And, you know, because we were raised to where that was like the worst thing in the world, it made everything really hard. And, you know, we've kind of been at the point like where we're healing, but in this process, okay, setting boundaries has been big, and pushing back, like when ours are getting run over, and, you know, she just keeps going with the guilt and shame bit and using that to manipulate us to respond in the way she wants from us. So now that we're pushing back against that, it's kind of been just been a pain in the ass, honestly. Oh shit. Just because, like, we don't want to talk to her about certain things because we know she's going to respond in a way that we don't want to have to deal with, and it's going to be extra dramatic just because we're not doing the thing she wants us to do, and thus increases our anxiety of having to deal with her at all. You know, because, like, we knew when we were going to the hospital to visit him, she was going to follow us into the waiting room at some point just to talk to us about how bad everything was with him, and, you know, we really thought we were going to lose him, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I was talking to my aunt a while this morning. My mom went in at the UPS store. We had my brother on the phone because Gracie likes talking to him before she gets out of the car for school. So we went back to that. My mom's just sitting here, like, silent and, like, won't say anything to anybody. So, since her stuff was an ordeal, she went in over UPS. It's like, if it's one thing and all I got to do is have them scan a code and whatever and take it, then that's one thing. But that wasn't what it was. But the manager from the phone ordeal last week asked her if she ever found her phone. And she said, well, kind of. She said, we know it's over in, you know, this certain group of apartments, because she had the location on. And the guy was like, huh. You know, he said, that's interesting. It's like, yeah. But it's like that entire day, the phone was being tracked to that particular UPS store. And then probably after closing hours or whatever, it ended up over at the apartment. So it's like, how we... You know, so maybe, I don't know if it might have stirred something in him with making the connection on the one dude that we're pretty sure was involved with it somehow, or what. But yeah, you know, but she told him that, and so she's got another phone, or a new phone now. And yeah, anyway, while she was in there, I was talking to my aunt, and, you know, I filled her in on the stuff that's been going on, and how she noticed that my mom had been extra silent. It's like, yeah. It's like, so here's what's going on with that. She's like, oh. And I mean, you know, she's the middle sister. She knows that my mom's a certain way, and has been her life too. So yeah, I said, but the big thing is she was a nurse. So when we were talking about stuff dealing with the hospital, I said the last time I was there to visit him in the hospital, and I pulled her out in the hall, or in the waiting room, to have a conversation, and I told her at some point it had to be okay for that man to die. I said it's just a natural cycle of life. You can't avoid this thing from happening just because you're terrified of it, and, you know, you're afraid of what's going to happen when that person is gone or whatever. And I told her that that he wasn't living, he just wasn't dying. And the fact that, you know, she and my grandma could get in there and be in his face and, oh, you can't go, what are we going to do if you're not here? I told her that was just making it so he couldn't die, but he wasn't able to live, because every single time he went from, like, the nursing home, staying there by himself, and then would end up back at the hospital. It's like he wasn't living either. His body was not able to keep him going enough to actually consider that living. I said all he is in a void because he can't live, but he can't die. And I said at some point it has to be okay for that man to die. And my aunt agreed, and she said she'd felt that way too, and she had noticed that it's like every single time my mom and my grandma were in there with that stuff, that it did seem like he had to rally around and keep pushing through to try to live forever or whatever. It's like, it's just, no, that's not how this works. At some point, everybody's going to go. We can't just fight it forever and pour out our entire lives on making somebody else last longer. That's not fair to anybody, and especially if you're just throwing all of your life away to keep somebody else going when they can't. It's like, that's not helpful. So yeah, didn't really have any major plan for talking points today. I just knew I really wanted to talk about Ziva being okay, since it's like I watched that on the video. It's like I saw that moment. It's like where it just shifted, and I was like actually starting to panic because I wasn't sure she was okay. It's like, oh no. So yeah. So I definitely thought that was worth addressing. Shut this off. Make them give me a quick crazy looks again. Or not. They're just asleep. Now her belly's making noises. So I woke up this morning and was kind of processing through some things. And okay, so they say, like, the people that I've heard talk about like the alpha and theta states are like when you're sleeping, are like when you're more open to communication with twin flames specifically. But I kind of feel like that's just, the whole telepathy thing. That's actually a real thing. But there's like so much density that most of us are affected by that we don't receive it clearly. And like, I listened to a thing where Abraham Hicks was talking about thought forms, and how if you're in an area where there's been some kind of tragedy, then there tends to be like thought forms that get kind of stuck in the space and the environment and the atmosphere, and there's a lot of fear and stuff like that with it. It's like, I think that's where a lot of it comes from. Like so when we are not let me figure it out. Let me work through this here. Processing. Okay, so when we are living more in the lower density state, then we're more susceptible to receiving the fears and the negative, the denser thought forms. Whereas if we are doing the work to clear the density from our own systems and thus operating at higher levels, we realize that, okay, if you aren't operating in the place of fear, then, and you operate, more from love, then it's more positive stuff that you receive. Whereas if you are operating from fear, then you're going to receive more of the lower density, negative seeming stuff, like the demons, if you will. And that was like one of the things that I think that has been kind of standing out for me especially. It's because, okay, I was in middle school, got pissed at God kind of a thing, and invited in demons or, the devil, whatever that was. It's like I didn't know if I believed in him, but I was at a point where I hated God, so I was like, what the hell, right? And then I think what happened was I ended up having all these lower density energies that latched on to me in like all the ways possible. And so it's like I've always been here to like help alchemize some of the lower density energies, but then you invite it in like that, and then it's like, okay, it goes back to like the sound waves and stuff. And if you listen to something and it's operating at a normal frequency, it sounds like somebody talking, right? But if you slow it way down, then it sounds like really ominous and scary and low and creepy. But I started hearing a lot of stuff like that, and is the stuff pushing me toward the following the suicidal ideation and making good on that kind of a thing. And once I realized it's like everything is connected, so if you're operating from the higher levels where you're not operating in fear, then you start hearing things less from that fearful state, where it draws on your anxiety and whatnot. It's like that stuff brings in more of the same. But if you are raising your frequency so you don't operate from that space anymore, then you start hearing things more clearly, and you might have the idea pop into your head where, okay, you can be thinking something and have a certain thought and get a response where, you don't know where it's coming from, but it's basically like the collective. As the collective is shifting into the higher frequencies, and we're less operating from the lower densities, then we're able to have the ideas that pop in, and like, hey, I should do that. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. I think about it a lot, but yeah. Because when I was at Ball State, I participated in this swing dancing club for a little while, and we met at night. So when I was walking back to the house that I was living in off campus, it's like all that stuff was like coming to me, and it felt like basically like when I invited in the demons, what had happened was I opened myself, okay, kind of like the moths being attracted to the flame kind of a thing, right? So you open yourself up, and then you get all this stuff that's trying to put out the light, right? Basically, you get swarmed by the stuff that, it's drawn in to the light, but doesn't really, okay, like the lower density energy stuff doesn't really like the light because it shows where they're not operating from their fullest potential. And then, people end up disliking you just because you trigger something in them that shows them there's much more to what they could be doing or being in life, and yet they choose most often to go the lower route, right? I saw a picture on Facebook, and it's got like, it's got the one person that's all lit up, and all they do is go about being themselves and, talking, being friendly, and others slowly start getting lit up all the way around them. It's kind of like that. But like, whatever you're putting out there, if you're putting out the light that you have to share with the world, then more people will be drawn to that light and hopefully start living from their own light, right? But if you're putting negativity in the world, then you're going to draw in more of those types. Like the whole deal with my mom and her phone last week. It's like, I feel like she was already in this very low density space. So this guy that, I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he picked up on what she was putting out into the environment around her, because she was just like so out of it and spacey and operating in the low density space. So when he saw an opportunity, he took the phone. But then like when I was there, it's like I was calling attention to like all this stuff. It's like, this is interesting. It's like I was calling the phone and then it just automatically started going straight to voicemail, almost like somebody like shut the thing off or whatever. And then when I mentioned that point, it's like the next time I called it, it started going to this thing that said, this call cannot be completed as dialed. It's like, it's like somebody's tampering with something, and like I felt like I was kind of making the guy uncomfortable on that end. But all I did was acknowledge that, stuff was happening while we were trying to figure it out, while Verizon had it pinned at that store. And then, so that's one of those things where it could go either way. And I think if my mom hadn't been in the low density, woe is me kind of space, then she probably would have got her phone back. But yeah, she did not. So I feel like that was just kind of one of those prime examples for me to like really see in action that what you're putting out, you're getting back, and you can see what's going on. Like all you got to do is just like be detached to like, don't have any big set expectation for what's going on. Just sit back and kind of observe, and it's really interesting to kind of see how things come together that way. And of course, she'll probably never get that, or she might never get that phone back. She might never see it again. But I think if that guy, maybe he realized that his actions did have more of an effect than he thought they would, because he probably thought, opportunity, nobody can prove this phone is here, so now it's my phone, and so it's just that easy, because she was putting out the density, he picked up on it, and he started choosing the wrong thing, right? So, maybe my being there and pointing this stuff out, maybe that was the opportunity for him to realize that there's a lot more that was happening than he realized in that situation. And should he have gone the higher route, he wouldn't have been locked into, all that confusion and aggravation. He was just sitting there. He looked real nervous the whole time. And of course, his coworkers aren't going to just jump in and be like, dude, did you do something? Because they didn't see him do anything. And on the camera showed my mom walking out with the phone. But it stopped at that. So it didn't show if she dropped it before she got in the car or whatever, but all we know is it didn't go with her. And it ended up on its own little journey. So yeah. So what do you do with that, right? But I feel like I'm a firm believer that the reason as much of the world is the way it is currently with the lower density energies and the bad behavior is just because people haven't been operating from the higher, the higher frequency, and thus people feel like they're not being seen anyway, so they can do whatever they want and they'll get away with it. But that's not how it works, because it does, like, what we do literally affects everybody else in some kind of way, because we're all connected. So yeah, So don't choose don't choose the thing that's going to lock you into a negative cycle and then make you feel bad because, it goes downhill fast. And then even in the situations where it doesn't seem like it was maybe that fast, like, the whole country's kind of jacked up really, and how we have like freaking narcissists in political office, and they want their own glory as much as anything, so they say the things that are going to get this group of people to support them, and then basically be tyrants otherwise. And I'm like I said, I'm a firm believer that the reason that kind of behavior is able to exist at all is because we've all had this sort of idea that what we do doesn't matter, but it does matter, but we have to start choosing to act from the higher ways of being, and going forward in that way before we can really see a substantial difference. But I definitely think we are in that process. But like I've said too, that old cycle, the old ways of being, that it's not going easy. Ego is not going out without a fight, and so we'll probably see a lot more crazy, stupid shit before it's done. But if we're not operating from that space, it makes it less okay for that kind of behavior to continue going on. Yeah. My ear's ringing now. I woke up this morning and was kind of having... Okay, so that's where I started that. I was thinking, like, that whole alpha theta state where you can communicate more with others that are operating at the same frequency. And it's like, in that space, energetically speaking, like, okay, the twin flame stuff, energetically speaking, we've always been together, we've never been apart. We only perceived it as a separation because, physically, that we didn't know there was any more out there, right? So, so it was kind of funny when I realized, I mentioned that dream yesterday, I think, where with the twin flame dream, and realizing that I was the runner, and realizing that I've always been running from myself. And this, as I've started to shift my way of being in the world, it's opening me up to these different realizations. Like the fact that I've been running from myself all along, and he's literally been surrounding me in some kind of way. Like, his energy has been around me my whole life, and his name, his birthday, it's like it was always there for me to see if I really looked at what was going on. Like, if I turned within and started realizing the way that it was there, because the name thing, like, it's the places I've pointed it out before are places that, in time when he is physically in my space as well as just energetically, it's the stuff that can be referred back to. Like, okay, so I've talked about the kid that my mom used to babysit that had that name, and his dad also had the name, right? And then my first boyfriend, the first serious boyfriend in high school, his little brother had that name. That's something I can't change, that information. I've locked it in, so whoever comes across my videos later after, I meet this person in the physical sphere, then, then they'll be able to refer back to, okay, so who was her serious boyfriend in high school? Well, sophomore year to or sophomore year in high school to sophomore year in undergrad. That's a pretty expansive time right there. But it was that dude's little brother that had the name, And then, the various other places it's popped up along the way. I talked about the other day, we got out of the truck for my grandpa's graveyard service. And the first name I see when I look up is that name on a stone right next to where we parked. Very first one I looked up and saw. And then as we kind of went around the truck and we're going over to get the casket and whatnot, there was another one on the other side. And then where I was sitting during the funeral, I saw another one, and they were all different ones, but it's a fairly common name for an expansive time. And so yeah, because it's everywhere, and then hi, you just need to talk. You ready to go home? Yeah. We're working on it. She just belts. Awesome. Oh, now we're all wound up. Hey, it's okay. It's okay. We'll be going soon. We'll go soon. I think we're going to have to go poop here soon is what I think, because somebody's belly's making noises. But anyway, also the birthday, his birthday, I talked about the stone that has had my attention, and I always saw it because the guy who died was born in 1980, so it always made me think of my brother on that end, because he was born the same year my brother was. But then the death date actually ended up being Twin Flame's birthday, so that's another thing that I'll be able to refer back to in time. But yeah, I think we're wound up now, and I really had no set path for what I was talking about today, so this is probably good enough since we're wound up and belly's making noises and belching in Mom's face. So I'm gonna go ahead and get off of here and take these kids home so they can go do their business in the backyard. So as always, I appreciate you, and until the next time, see ya.